Good evening, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. I would like to speak on some of the 7 priorities mentioned in this report. Mr. Speaker, crime prevention program. I'm glad that the department continues to implement crime prevention program. I'm glad that the department continues to implement a range of enforcement activities. The department makes mention of arrest of 24 people for the possession of illegal firearms. It might not look like a high number of illegal firearms in the wrong hands, but one has to take note that this is only 1/4 of the year. It is alarming that so many people are in possession of illegal firearms. 664 arrests for driving under the influence. That's also troubling, considering that it all happened within 3 months. Truthfully speaking, we are only mentioning the ones we're not even mentioning the ones that were let go. 2,112 traffic-related enforcement operations are a good sign. Just in 1/4, Mr. Speaker, we do need these operations, and one can never say that there are too many. Bylaw enforcement program, Mr. Speaker, here we are always falling short. I say this, Mr. Speaker, because no matter where I go across the city, bylaw infringements are visible everywhere. Even if one tried to avoid seeing them, it would be impossible. If the department did 484 joint operations, I truly do not see a positive result emanating from these operations. As a ward councillor working on the ground at ground zero, I really do not see the ward-based policing working the way it was designed to work. I suspect that reluctance from JPD officers on the ground to enforce is mostly responsible for this. I note the 1,136 shacks that were removed during land invasions in this report. But why are individual shacks not getting removed from parks, etc.? Why is JPD failing to remove single shacks built on pavements and parks before it escalates out of control? Illegal signage is another scourge, Mr. Speaker. Looking at certain wards in the south and wards in the eastern side of Johannesburg, it is impossible to actually find a tree that does not have a sign nailed to it. Mr. Speaker, we are removing signs, but we are not punishing the people that put them there. They all have phone numbers. How difficult is it to find the perpetrators as they all leave evidence behind? Now we talk about illegal connections. I see nothing wrong with this report. Mr. Speaker, illegal connections are creating massive damage in infrastructure. They are damaging the grid so badly that sometimes they put blocks of residents in the dark for days and days. The city should devise a system that will punish people that connect themselves illegally. And we should also do more to punish the officials that assist the residents with illegal electricity, especially when they get sent out to disconnect defaulters and end up getting paid not to disconnect. On this, I also think that the community should be audited more regularly. Mr. Speaker, on this report, it looks like emergency proactive services are on the ground doing what has to be done. 722 liquor outlets inspected, 1,786 buildings were inspected, 1,438 flammable substances were inspected. Mr. Speaker, here the numbers do show good work being done. This, Mr. Speaker, tells us that someone is doing their jobs out there. Disaster preparedness and response. Mr. Speaker, from personal experiences, the disaster management team, in my opinion, are brilliant, and one should look more into them. The people working in disaster management are really committed, and unfortunately, they seriously don't have much to work with. We should really pay them more attention and do more to empower these people on the ground to help unfortunate disaster victims. God forbid, if we have to deal with a grand-scale disaster, I ask the city, are we ready to cope? Mr. Speaker, the IIOC, what can I say? We spent millions in the last 8 years with this grand plan of improving and upgrading and extending the CCTV system across the city. Mr. Speaker, millions spent, and in reality, we have gone back backwards so far that we are touching base with the Stone Age. Mr. Speaker, ideas, exciting ideas, great plans with a good vision for tomorrow are shattered. We moved from a building in the inner city, Pelmo Towers, a small, simple setup that had eyes in most of the inner city. And we, the city, decided to acquire a massive building to house their new ambitious project. We did an oversight just a few days ago, and only 2.79% of the cameras were operational. Well, in camera numbers, we are talking in the region of less than 20 cameras. Please let's not forget that the report mentions 574 CCTV cameras. What happened to the 574 cameras mentioned? You see, Mr. Speaker, people's lives are at stake here. It is not a light matter, and we as a city should and must do everything we can to protect our people. Mr. Speaker, we now have an opportunity to remedy these fallbacks and work towards a better, safer future for our city and our residents. On the JMPD report, Mr. Speaker, as much as I understand the need to embrace the Buya Mutetu operations in the inner city, it is also unfair that most of the resources have been deployed into the inner city. What about the suburbs, Mr. Speaker? The residents also need to take back their streets where they live. As a matter of fact, that's where they are the most vulnerable. Deploying the bulk of JMPD as much as it was needed in the inner city, we should also create the balance and never forget that Johannesburg is one city, and that includes the suburbs around the city. A lack of law enforcement in the suburbs is quite evident. It's there for everyone to see. So, Mr. Speaker, I urge this council to make sure that a balance is created to safeguard our residents, not only at work, but also where they live. Our time is now, Mr. Speaker, to change the city and go forward with the best service delivery that you can possibly give our residents of Johannesburg. Like my chairperson always keeps on saying, it is the government's duty to protect its people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well done.